So good evening, everyone. If everyone can mute their microphones so we don't hear any background noise, and we just need to let Flash in there. And we've had a slight change to what we were planning to do. We were originally going to Japan tonight, but as David Collins pointed out, we'd forgotten to mention some of the other ATI built engines and some of the other projects we got up to in the 1980s and the 1990s. So Dave has had a trip back into the archive and come out with some gems for us to have a look at. As ever on these presentations, if people wish to add any additional historic information, please do so. We can only go on what's on the record, and some of you may have been there, so do feel free to speak up, and we will have a look at the comments at the end of the session. And as ever, if I can get it to move on, we in the museum, we are an independent charity, and if anyone feels they'd like to help with various projects, we're still working on St Alder. Jack Divner's working on a tender design, and there's various other projects going on as well. Now, there is one thing we would like to draw attention to since the last meeting, and tonight's talk is going to be in memory of Tony Crowhurst, who was for many years one of the senior engineers at the Romney Hive and Dymchurch Railway, and is one of a generation of people who are the new people on the miniature railway scene. And Tony, as I'm sure Andy will tell us, has made a significant impact to the world of miniature and 15-inch gauge railways. Unfortunately, we do know we've got photos in the collection of him, and we just haven't had time to look them out. Now, in these situations, normally we would say have a minute's silence, but with us being digital, the danger is people might think that the presentation has crashed. So we think it's more appreciation is actually if we give Tony a round of applause. So please join us in giving Tony a round of applause.
Excellent. Andy Nash, do you mind if I just say something very quickly, Stuart?
You may, Andy, yes.
Tony had been ill for over 10 years, sadly, but I'm not going to go into the full details of it, but it was Parkinson's and then dementia. He died Tuesday last week. I've been in close contact with his sister, Nicola, and Richard Down, that some of you may know, who used to work with Tony, doing a lot of the painting work. They've now set a date for the funeral, which is the 15th of September, but Nicola has come up with the idea of a Memorial Day for Tony later on. They haven't set a date yet, but it will be on the RHDR with the title of Coal, Celebration of Anthony's Life. And of course, he's Anthony's family. So I'll let you all know as soon as I know when that date's going to be. But there'll be something to do with a special train, possibly with locos that Tony had overhauled. And there'll be some fireworks, apparently. But his sister is very stoic about it, Nicola, and you know, I think she felt it was for the best. Really, it was very sad to see Tony, but hey, here we are. Anyway, that's me done.
Oh, thank you for adding that in, Andy. We'll now hand over to Dave, and we'll see what we can have a chat about.
Okay. Hi, good evening. Apologies for some of the shots being out of sync. I haven't had quite as long to work on this as I hoped, but hopefully you'll get the gist. There are quite a few areas where we have question marks, so I'll flag them up, and if anyone can add information, we'd be very grateful. So we thought, having covered the early scooters, back in August 1970, Duncan Webster decided with Ian Smith that they should build a new scooter. So they put a Villiers engine in it and did a really nice job. all mod cons, well, some mod cons, and apparently it actually emulated the early scooters in that there are records of time trials from Lancaster to the top of Millwood, topping 50 miles an hour, which makes our ICL1 look a bit timid. So we've got quite good details. Peter is actually in the process of rebuilding it because it had got a bit sad, and he's found a motor, and he's recently found a carburetor. So we're hoping it's going back together, possibly to use in the museum as an exhibit when we take a loco out. Unlikely to be allowed out on the main line. But
Don't go there. Don't go there.
it might go up and down the head shunt. You never know. It was actually almost an elegant thing. Now, here's our first question. Does anyone know who was driving it at that point? And we're not even sure who's behind Ian. We thought it was Duncan Webster, but somebody said, no, it isn't. So if anyone has any clues, would be grateful. And apparently, because it emulated the early scooters, it was judged as being too fast, too dangerous. So they swapped the engine. Oh, there's our curator being dragged along. So they swapped the engine for one from a concrete mixer, which was much more sedate. And Dickie apparently used it quite frequently and said it was very good. He was so taken with it that he built a roof for it as well. So when he was working at Delgarth, he used to use it quite frequently. And in the foreground's the Flying Scotsman, Bill Stewart's model. Unfortunately, this is the stage just before Peter started rebuilding it, so he had a little bit of work to do. This is sort of, it's not a loco that we built, but this is NG39, which was the second of our Muir Hill Fordsons. And really, strictly speaking, we didn't build it, but the chassis that you can see, that big lump of metal at the bottom, is the only thing that has survived. It's had, we think, 5 new engines and obviously been seriously modified. In the mid-30s, and we're not entirely sure when exactly, there was a move to actually have something that would get up to speed quickly, not take ages to get steam up, and could cope with fairly serious loads. So they put a trailing bogie on it, a little extension at the back there, gave it pseudo tanks, and really from the mid-30s to the mid-50s, it was actually one of the things that kept the railway going. River Est was taken out just before the war, and then lay in pieces really right through to 1952. Ert was brought back in a little bit earlier, but we have quite a few shots from the 50s, and the majority of them are this little beast. This Dick Nick in its other role of carrying some granite wagons. Then in, and I have to check my notes here, 1975, having already had a reconditioned engine in, they found a Perkins P6 engine in a sunken boat in the estuary. So they picked it out and refurbed it, put it in, and because that's a longer power unit and the Ford gearbox was also to be added in as well as the original gearbox, then as you can see, the radiator has to go in the front, and the radiator was bigger as well. So it ended up looking slightly strange. But again, it worked and it did the business. For a brief time, and this is slightly out of sync, it was painted grey to look like Frank, presumably for one of the Thomas events. That was the colour in '85 when it had a new Perkins engine, and the man from Perkins arrived to rename it. And this is the most recent one we have. This is from August 2019, so just before the pandemic struck, and that's its current form. And another view of it. Then we move on to the railcar, Silver Jubilee, call it what you will. And it started out a little bit basic. And this was one of the early trialing sessions. They did manage to cover some of it up just in time for the 1976 centenary cavalcade, and it actually led the cavalcade with its Union flag. That's just coming into Urton Road and across the marsh. There was a feeling that if it didn't quite make it, there was plenty of power behind that would give it a push. I think it was fingers crossed. Gave it as it was for the Silver Jubilee, it was given a coat of silver paint, and it made a relatively successful first trip. Not sure the driver should be getting champagne, but and obviously with it being quite a compact vehicle, we had lots of VIPs here, and they all squeezed onto the following train, which was driven by our well-known Northern Rock driver. So that's the rest of them arriving at Delgarth. This is another cavalcade, I'm guessing, and I'm sorry I'm having to guess a bit, I think this is 1981. Even though Ian's clothes look a bit 70s, I think it's a bit later. And it spent quite a lot of time on track 2, showing off, I suppose you call it. Now here's another question mark that we have. We know that the vehicle behind is 140-001. We don't know if this was a test train, a first train. So if anyone out there does know, please let us know.
It must have been something.
Say again?
I said I'm Googling as you speak.
I'm so old-fashioned that I really must get into the habit of Googling more, because I've asked a couple of questions, and in fact 2 today, and been told, oh yeah, if you Google him, he's on so-and-so and so-and-so. So,
but what's interesting is, like today, when you've got units going past all the time, no one really bats an eyelid, but there was enough there to get 4 people to stand and watch, which wouldn't normally happen.
Yeah, there's a few more up there as well.
So there must have been something happening.
Yeah.
Maybe it was the future, as we were about to find.
We'll carry on. Oh, go on.
According to Google, the unit was built between 79 and 81. There was only one of them.
Oh, right.
Out of service from 86, but it's been preserved. It's at the Keith and Dufftown Railway. Not familiar with that one. It's being restored to its former state by volunteers at the railway. That's quick, Tracy.
Oh, brilliant! Thank you.
For
That's
those who
lesson
do
for
it,
me.
just go 140 or BR class 140, and that's what comes up on Wikipedia.
Right.
Mhm.
Oh, shut up.
You might need a field trip to Scotland, Dave.
I might also need a little bit of encouragement to use digital a bit more instead of my photos. Thanks, Andy. We put this in and it actually raises another question. A, what happened? And B, why are they trying to push it down the hill? So again, if anyone was there, we'd be grateful. We think Sheila came along to the rescue, but we still don't understand why they were trying to push it across.
I wonder if they were trying to rock it to get a bit of timber underneath to pack it and then maybe slide it back over onto the track.
Yeah, yeah.
Dave, it's Trevor.
Yeah.
It actually was being towed down the railway by Sheila when it tipped over. When it tipped over, going round Rock Point, leaning to the cliff face, as it were, to the rock face, and that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to right it again.
Right.
It was at the time when we were still having trouble with the Whiteley in inverted commas bogies, etc. And it was a down train, sort of the 10:10 off the top on a summer's morning, with trouble with the power unit, so it was being towed around as a train set by Sheila, and that's what happened. It tipped into the rock face coming around Rock Point, caused quite a lot of damage to the track. I think, I remember right, the first steam round trip was cancelled. It was roughly packed together by Douglas Ferreira and Staff Roberts, and believe you me, when I Northern Rock over it, boy was it rough. But that's the story.
Oh, brilliant! That's great. Thanks, Trevor. Because quite often, all I'm able to record is just what I can see on the picture, and I very rarely have information on the back of the prints to work from. We should have had Peter in, actually, because he's got some quite good stories about Silver Jubilee was supposed to go to Liverpool, and ER were going to paint it. And literally a morning or so before it was due to set off, several tins of paint arrived and a brief guide as to how it should be laid out. So I think Peter did some of his last minute painting on that one. It did get there and ran the shuttle. And ultimately we had a 4-car set with a semi and a saloon to build it up. And I'm sure Stuart said, I've got some of these out of sequence. I think I've asked this question before, but is this it is the power unit from Silver Jubilee, isn't it?
Yeah, you've got the stripes.
Yeah, somebody
yes.
say yes. There's another engine that I need to check later. Some of you might recognize one of our drivers at an earlier stage, not exactly the outside number 10 picture, but Richard Smith when he was 4. And later on, we had some interesting pics when the 2 units were worked on fire prevention runs. So I'm moving quickly on because we've got quite a lot, and some of them I don't have very much to say about. So Doris, Lady Wakefield, as she started to come together, and we think that the 2 guys talking to Ian Smith are Who did I say it was?
Harold Bartel.
Yeah. We think one of them's Harold Bartel, and the other one we think is Basil Markham, because we've seen similar pictures up at Durton Road, and that was definitely Basil Markham. So we have a kind benefactor to the railway in Harold Bartel, and the person who built Lalello, which is down in our museum. This, I think, I'm slightly out of sequence with, but we're just looking at some of the liveries it went through. Obviously had to take part in Thomas, and obviously had to be Doris. This, I don't think, was a popular colour scheme with DRS. But obviously it had to have an ace driver. That was a special one for Trevor. And then we go into
Thank you, Dave.
We go into the current sort of setup.
Last winter, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's actually quite up to date for me. And then we quickly move on. We had a couple of things running parallel, and one of them was after Doris, we were asked to do Lady of the Lakes for the Ruislip Lido. We haven't got very many pictures of the construction, but you'll see that we were also working on Flower of the Forest at the same time. So there was quite a lot going on. And that's Lady of the Lakes as it was finished before they pulled the wheels in for their gauge. I think it's quite a nice shape. Then this is down at Ruislip as it arrived. And again, the choice of livery. I thought that was redder than that, but oh yeah, it's a bit better. And then there should be a blue one in there somewhere. So we move on to what we were describing as a refurbishment, but looks a little bit more like a complete rebuild. Carol Jean is a Baltic outline, 21-inch gauge from Blackpool, and looked in a bit of a state. Someone's chalked on it for complete rebuild, built in 1933. And although we have a couple of pictures of them taking it apart, we'll move straight on to progress. Moved around on a couple of trolleys, which seemed to work. Starting to put the bodywork back. And the finished result, I think, is actually quite spectacular. And although it looks big on the Ratty, when it got back to Blackpool, it doesn't look quite so big. It looks more in keeping. So having done that, we then had a little go at Mary Louise. And as we were still having rail tours at that point, there was an obvious photo opportunity, which was that one. Gathered quite a crowd. Then again, this is, it was a couple of contracts that we had to refurbish stroke, rebuild peat bog locomotives, 2-foot gauge. Some were from Fison's at Wigton, and some from peat bog just outside Annan. And again, moving them around on trailers. At that stage, they must still have been using what's now Dickie's workshop. This is definitely one of the ones that came from Wigton, and sort of shows it more tidied up from both sides. And we thought we'd give our track colleagues a little look at how they ran tracks around the peat bog. Ian Smith looking on in disbelief, I think. Obviously, they had first class accommodation as well, and their own turntable. So just spin through 90. This was the other engine that I wasn't sure about. I don't know, quite honestly, I have no details on the back. So if anyone recognizes it, if they could let me know, that'd be brilliant. Right, so the centenarian and a bit. Ian Fraser decided that it would be really nice if the Kerr Stewart 720 that came from Dundee Gasworks was converted into a rail motor. So if you imagine a steam engine at the front and then Joan behind it, that was the original concept. So it arrived, and once again, just to show how hard Trevor has worked through his lifetime. So it was offloaded and on sort of onto righty tracks. And although this is quite a basic picture, it is quite nice because it does show the details as was. Stuart has suggested that we couldn't do what we did to it now. And I think their argument at the time was that there was one at Towin, and Stuart informs me.
There's one, or I believe the Royal Collection in Scotland has one, which is now at Beamish. And it's kind of a bit of a flippant comment, but looking at how people have reacted to some of the recent narrow gauge rebuilds, particularly on social media, I think we were probably quite fortunate that we didn't have social media in the 1970s, because it probably, but it was a different world. And actually, we ended up with something rather special. And there's still two others out there that are in original condition. So it was the right decision.
Yeah, it's
from our point of view.
It's a valid argument. Yeah. And the apprentices from BNFL had been involved with St Alder, and again had some input into Dundee. So this was a sort of celebration trip with just the one coach. No, there were two coaches. I've jumped again. That's Ian Fraser himself on getting ready for the inaugural run, if you like. This is the apprentices and co having a little run. This one I've thrown in because it's a relatively new one for us, and it's a nice one of Graham. We thought originally the other gentleman was Colin Cable, but we're really not sure, and we think that guy is the same as that one, and we're hoping someone will come up with a name. So another one over to you. I'll carry on in the meantime, but we'd love to know. Then this is Mr. Roy Pilling from BNFL, top board, who did the sort of ceremony. And there's a familiar face somewhere on the trip. That's going through Lancaster Mill. Some of you might recognize the gentleman in the cab on the left, along with our Ian Page. George.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
All right. Which George?
Barlow.
George Barlow. All right. Okay.
I was waiting for a response from Andy there. In this form, it was actually quite compact, quite a nice tidy machine. Sorry, Trevor, but I had to throw that one in. We've renamed this the Artful Dodger in all of our images.
Never met him before in my life.
And this.
Sorry, I was talking at you and I was on mute.
Right, go ahead.
Yeah, it was George, of course.
Right. Okay. Yeah, this I've jumped forward a little bit because we think this is 1990 and the celebration of 75 years of 15-inch. So we'll probably go backwards in time. It was decided, obviously not by Graham, that it should have a cab for the winter. Different. We'll just say it's a nice picture, shall we? And obviously we had to have Martin in there somewhere, because Martin was very fond of Dundee. And we like that shot. It has been replicated a few times, but it just looks nice. I was sort of hoping, I keep meaning to ask Neil what exactly the conversation was at the time, if he can remember. So we'll leave that maybe to the end.
It's a task for Christopher this weekend,
Yes.
on his days off, to find out what his dad was saying or doing.
Yes, and what the reply was. Then it went down to Muir Valley, and I'm told on the information that I could find that using the tank wagon as a bowser effectively made life a lot easier, and therefore probably pushed the decision towards maybe making it a tender engine. But that's just what I've read.
Because the tank does have history as a tender, doesn't it? Which will be another talk in the future, Dave.
Yes,
because that was River Earth's tender.
That was River Earth's tender frame. Just incidentally, you'll notice that I haven't really mentioned River-esque and Will and Beck, which are, substantial jobs that have gone on in and around Ravenglass, shall we say. We're hoping to actually make something more of a feature in the future of the development of those. I'm just tidying up the odd bits around the end. Not really. You can see the tender frame behind. Starting to put everything together. And this is recorded as being its first trip as a tender engine, with Ian Smith having the honours. They got to Miteside. I love looking at old shots of Miteside because when you see it absolutely clear up the fell side behind now, it looks like the enchanted forest behind. And up to Fishground and back to Martin. They obviously had finished playing and given it back to Martin. That we included because it's a classic Martin shot, and it was often to be seen in that position. Just checking on progress. And we included this because unusually for the Ratty, the smoke stroke steam is almost mainline. It's not something that you see on the Ratty, so it is a unique shot. Whether it was because it was absolutely full and working hard. Somebody coming in?
I was going to say, Dave, you just don't really know what he was disposing of at the time. Doesn't necessarily mean there was coal going on the fire.
Yes, good point, Trevor.
In that guise with the maxi coaches, that's when Peter argues it's most effective because it could move a lot of people.
Yes,
with a relatively short train that it could cope with. So that's Peter's argument anyway.
Yeah, it's looks quite valid. There's quite a few people poking
Mm.
out. And they did a little program with Stuart Harrison's road roller coming over the passes, and there was a requirement, and I don't know whether it was a cosmetic one, to deliver some coal. So Dundee was sent up with it, but it produced a nice shot on the way back down at Rock Point, which sort of proceeds nicely to what we think is one of the best ratty shots of all time, which is that one. It kind of sums up the valley and the view, and it's just a nice picture. Yes, obviously everyone had to get involved in the Thomas weekends, so it became Lyle Thomas. Then it went off, had a little run around the country, an interesting combination, but again, a nice shot. Nice to see it at Romney. And this is, where did we decide this was?
No, that's Romney still.
Oh, that's
Because
Romney.
you
The
can
next
see
one.
Dungeness Lighthouse in the background.
Well, not only that, but there's
And
a
it says
bloody great
RHDR
sign
on the
this-
front there.
There's some fabulous footage on one of the Grimler DVDs from me, which features some of the galas, and it shows some wonderful footage of Dundee just going along like an absolute bat out of hell.
All right. Oh, something else to look out for?
I'll send you the DVD, Dave.
Right. It's possible, and this is embarrassing for me, it's possible we've got it sitting over there on the bookshelf.
Yeah, there's two I've got. One features Bonnie Dundee, and the other one features River Might with, of course, Ron Clark at the time
Oh,
of it.
right. Yeah.
Because interestingly in the picture, it's had a Romney modification because the whistle's been moved over so it'll fit through the top.
I've just worked out how to unmute my screen. One of the other interesting April Fool's spoofs was that we published in Marshland, I say we as an association, that a picture of Bonnie Dundee's cab morphed onto the back of Hercules, turned into a tank engine. It had to be published on April the 1st. And I'm desperately looking to try and find it for you, but do you think I can under pressure? Anyway, back to you.
That's all right. I fully sympathize with that. The reason why I haven't looked at all these videos is that I'm supposed to finish the stills first, and I'm getting on top of it. I think the backlog's down to 7,000. Yes.
We're 50,000 now because I've just taken possession of Tony's photos and
Oh.
thought I got on top of it, but it's on top of me now. Anyway, back to you.
Yeah. We've a fellow feeling for that. We rather like the sign growing out of the funnel on this one, and this.
I think this is
Yeah,
Cleethorpes.
this we think is Cleethorpes. If anyone can confirm, I'm sort of going back through the notes. It's a good job Stuart's here, because I'd just be rambling. This obviously from the red object sitting on the tender there, just this side of the filler cap, and from Martin's face, he wasn't a happy bunny having to be rescued by a diesel. And when Martin passed, there was a lovely tribute, and it was put on platform 2, some flowers, which was nice. Then it joined the Preservation Society for a while, helping to pull in some more volunteers. And this is the most recent ones we've had, where it's on its journey with Flower to Cleethorpes. Yes. Like I said, it's a
And
good job
that's-
you're here.
That's probably 20 something, because this is before the overhaul, isn't it?
Yes.
So I can't remember when it went.
No, I can't.
No.
But,
It might be about
It's-
2016-ish.
Yeah, I think it was about 16, Stuart.
oh, lovely. You do realise you're going to keep me busy all weekend trying to write this lot up. But I'm grateful nonetheless.
Is there a correlation in the years between Peter's beard length?
It has been referred to before in the magazines, in that originally we were told that historians could date the various pictures from the arrival of George's beard and Peter's beard, and then the length of it. But no one's actually taken them up on it yet. So having seen Flower of the Forest, we thought we'd do a quick recap. We've jumped back again. I know nothing about Flower, so I'm just showing you some pictures. There wasn't an awful lot of space. It was an interesting operation. I'm sure, once again, Trevor will have some more stories. But it wandered around with various couplings and various signs, which again is a nice gesture. And the driver and the controller. Once again, it had to join in with the Thomas weekends, and this time as Lyle Toby. And then it had a chunter. Well, it had several trips up the valley, with various. There's your bell.
There's the bell, yes.
We were commenting on that earlier. And we put this one in especially for Flash and Sarah, because we know they're watching tonight. And what it says, Benny had actually steamed it up especially for the occasion. And it says, congratulations, Flash and Sarah, from Baby Wedding Bell. Oh, your daughter's just arrived. The passengers seem to vary in these shots, so again, it's down to my fault rather than anything else. Dr. Chase in there somewhere at the back. So it got as far as the cottages, changed colour and set off back. Now, again, does anyone know where this is? And does anyone know the name of the gentleman on the left?
Dave, you did go to Cleethorpes with it.
Yes, yeah, that's one of the trips.
Yeah, I don't think somebody's just put, or Sol's put Bure Valley, but I can't be certain whether it went there, to be honest. I don't know. You have to look back in Ratty Mags.
Yeah, we've got some pictures of it at Bure Valley.
Yeah, oh, right, yeah. Well, it
But
could
we
be
don't
then.
think this is it. We're not quite sure what the big blue lump is behind. But again, I'm fishing for information.
I think 72B is the Benny's shed plate from possibly Salisbury.
Oh, right. That's something else I didn't know. This is a very productive evening. Right, let's be a brief gap. And this is definitely Cleethorpes, and it did a goods train as well as a passenger train. And we're hoping there wasn't much traffic on that road. Mr. Gentleman seems to be more concerned with his camera than where he's going.
So it's a cycle path, Dave. It's okay. You,
That's all right.
you can get away with riding on the wrong side of the road on a cycle path.
See the things you learn at these sessions. And finally, another question. I'm fairly sure when I lifted this still that there was a comment on it about it being built by Ian Smith, and that this was at Silloth. But I don't know any more details than that. So again, if anyone else can add information, it would be gratefully received. I only stumbled across it recently. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, Dave, I think that's one of the ones that Ian built.
Right.
Yeah, I think he built 2.
Did you say there was a Black 5?
There's a
He
Black
built
5,
a Black
isn't there?
5,
Yeah.
earlier. This was when he was retired, I think. I've never seen this before, but it's got Cumbria all over it, hasn't it?
It'd be a very big 7¼ inch gauge engine. That's a retirement project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's the other one, the Sir Arthur Hayward
Yeah,
down
that's
at
Eastleigh,
yes.
isn't it?
Eastleigh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I've never seen this one finished, but you look at the steps and the round windows, it's a Cumbria.
Yeah, it's a lovely image. So with apologies for flying through things, but you'll see why some of it needed to be glossed over from my lack of knowledge. But anything else that comes in would be gratefully received.
Shall we have a look at the comments, Dave, and see what's come through? And we'll go to that page as well.
It was supposed to be Trevor.
But Trevor will be able to hear. So Christopher's put in, when we were talking about the 140 unit,
Yes.
it was the prototype for the Pacers.
Right. Okay, shall I add that?
And then Mark Harrington has mentioned, does anyone remember Glyn taking his trial bike out of Ravenglass? It achieved frightening speeds on the shuttle. So whether that was when we were looking at the pictures of the scooter.
Yes, sounds like it.
Did he have a trials bike?
I don't know. Did Glenn have a trials bike?
Oh, Glenn has a trials bike, and so did Duncan Webster. And I can't now remember. I think it was Duncan who was racing a train down the valley, overtaking just before Muncaster Mill to meet one of the large beams that had been off one of the bridges that had been dumped at Muncaster Mill in the grass to replace the bridge across the river. This is a totally useless memory. but
all right.
if you can imagine somebody on a trials bike in long grass accelerating to overtake a train and meeting a very large lump of wood that he didn't expect, the manoeuvre was interesting.
Did the bike survive?
Oh, everybody survived, but not necessarily man on bike in transit, as they say.
Well, I've got an even more boring one. My 13-year-old self used to race Graham back down to Fisher Ground from the top when it was on the last train and he was going home for his tea. And my cousin and I on a tandem, a cast iron tandem, used to race him down the valley. And we had an air horn in a bulb horn.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone knew we were doing it.
Were you on
And
the
did you beat
Were you
him?
on the road? Or not on the track though?
No, we were on the road. Most of the time we were on the road.
And then Matthew has asked, did they use the original wheels? Which I imagine is in reference to, we've showed pictures of the scooter in its, when it had the videos.
No, it was, sorry, it was in reference to Bonnie Dundee.
Oh, right, okay.
Sorry, Bonnie Dundee used the third Fordson's wheels.
Yes, I've read that somewhere.
Yeah.
I think it was one of
Well,
the
it was
pieces.
something else, no doubt.
So just in case you
Yeah.
didn't pick it up there, Matthew, Bonnie Dundee ran on a set of tractor wheels.
Probably from NG41. Because that was the one that was scrapped to keep the other two running.
And Mark has added that Bonnie Dundee used to hunt at speed with Martin at the helm.
Perfectly stable. It never gave any issues whatever.
And the claggy picture apparently is typically Martin, probably done to order.
No, we used to use special coal. We used to get in extra.
Is that what created the main line effect? Smoke
Yeah, it would
coming
be.
up.
What he would be doing was mixing Kellingly coal with whatever anthracite we might have had at the time.
Because Trevor said we don't know what he was putting into the firebox to produce
Yeah, but
the effect.
well, it might have been. We got some American coal in the first part of the coal strike, 1984. The thing was that River Esk was gas producer, and after a bit of fiddling, we were able to burn that coal effectively smokelessly, whereas Martin was like
we've just
destroyers at Jutland, you know.
Yeah, we've just shown that.
And so someone's agreeing with Ryan that the Graham Whistler footage of Bonnie Dundee at Romney is excellent footage, and I think it's on Gala Time at Romney or something like that. But it is very good footage of it.
Operating within the Romney speed limit.
Yes, we've been chased by specifics, and very impressive it was.
I'll make a point of looking out for it.
There's both footage of, I think it was double heading with Green Goddess, and then there was footage of it on its own as well. I'm just having a look to see if I can find the DVDs actually. Yeah, so yeah, Gala Time at Romney is the one with Bonnie Dundee on, and then the other one just titled Romney High and Dymchurch Railway, and on the front cover it has River Light leading, looks like Green Goddess and possibly Dr. Sin.
I remember piloting on River Light once with my dates on Churchill behind us, and you couldn't hear the bonging noise your tenders make. It was going so fast, it just became one. A neck brace.
And Mark's commented that Flower was Benny's baby. And people remembering crazy summer evenings going up the valley with it. And Flash says thank you, and it was a much appreciated gesture by Benny.
Yeah, it was a nice touch.
Well, I shared the screen for a minute. I found a nice picture of Tony. I thought it'd be nice to show people.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, please.
We can, just bear with me. You're asking us into technological realms here, Andy, so we'll see what we can do.
Right, still disabled.
And what I will need to do, I've got to remember how to do it now.
Over the whole meeting, though, please. Have a meltdown.
Oh, yes, I can see it. It's a nice shot.
Can you see it?
Well, only on the preview.
You can only see you, Andy.
I can't see it.
Just bear with me. So let's try that one. Try now, Andy.
Okay, hang on. Ooh,
I see you now.
there we go. You see that?
Oh, there we are.
Yeah, that's it.
But that's
Oh, right.
Tony's Crowhurst Engineering Workshop. I have no idea what the loco is. It was just in amongst all the some of the photos that I've already scanned. Let's see, Henrietta Green.
The Audley End.
Audley End.
Loco.
Ah, yes, he did do a lot of work.
And there were 2 7 1/4s, weren't there? One for Brett Rogers, and one for Lawrence Martin.
For the Wayside Railway.
Wayside,
Yes.
yeah.
Peter, isn't Audley End 10 1/4?
Sorry?
Yes.
Isn't Audley End 10 1/4?
Yeah, this is the Audley End 10 1/4, yeah.
Well, let's dolly in on the rails for you. What do you reckon?
I reckon 7 1/4.
No, I don't know. Anyway, there you go.
Thank you. I mean, unfortunately, as I said, I only heard about Tony's passing today. Otherwise, I'm sure I have a couple of good shots of him way back with Northern Chief, and he was looking at the front end of Northern Chief, looking a bit worried. I'll dig them out. I think, Andy, you may have them already.
Just a button on the Audley End, just Googled it, it is 10 1/4.
Thank you.
Right.
Do you know this Google's going to catch on, Dave? Yes. Where's Roger? Oh, Roger Munn's in the engine shed at Romney with number 9 behind him.
Okay.
Yes.
He's keeping thoughts on. Get me head.
They've got good Wi-Fi in their engine shed. And obviously someone's confirmed we're at Cleethorpes, and someone has suggested that the 7 1/4" gauge was at Western Park, and that's where it is now, the loco that Ian Smith, we think, built.
Oh, lovely. Right.
And I think that was Sol telling us that.
Thanks, Sol.
And it's called, he thinks it's called River Ellen.
Yeah, that figures. That does ring a bell.
Yeah, I think it is.
I think Ian Smith, someone knew, was on Facebook a few months back, who posted the photo, and he did say it was called River Ellen, and yeah, it was a park.
Yeah, as I say, it's entirely my fault for not listening, in the sense of not reading and writing it down. So I'm relying on you.
Is anyone looking at Roger's screen?
Oh, there's Mr. Allen there as well. It must be a long day at Romney. Yeah.
Or is it just the late shift?
It could be the late shift.
Roger, we want to
engines are
see the
probably
nice
hard to
big black
keep.
one.
Down south here, you know, it's still summertime allegedly.
And
So someone else was trying to speak there. Did
I'm not
someone
sure.
else? No.
And Matthew has asked, did Sea Lion from Groudle Glen do some trials at Ravenglass when it was first restored?
Yes, it did, but we didn't actually include it because the only participation we had was to fit a third rail. The apprentices at BNFL did all the work on Sea Lion, and then they brought it here and they just ran it up and down the head shunt as a treat. I think they carried, if memory serves, they carried 300 of the apprentices up and down the head shunt. But I think that was our only real involvement.
And then Andy has mentioned about the Queen travelling in Silver Jubilee.
Yes.
Is that right, Peter?
No, the Queen didn't travel in Silver Jubilee.
Oh, she came and went
They
over the
u-
bridge to Samson.
They used the Sheila to pull the Royal Romney coach
Yes.
with her.
Right, okay.
But despite all our efforts, including a very interesting meeting that was held in the paint shop while the paint was drying, and the directors have been averted that Her Majesty was needing to our Queen was going to travel in our Silver Jubilee.
Mhm.
And it was the decisions that needed to be made to make it suitable. And they made all these decisions, kept changing their minds, and poor Ranald Coyne was trying to record the decision. The decision went round and round.
Okay,
And then-
I did say earlier in the evening that had Peter been here, we would have had both stories, the royal part and the painting part.
Well, the painting's interesting, but I won't go into that. Because the royal part was that Douglas popped an idea into the equation, so to speak, and that seemed to be it. But as they were all leaving, I heard a very, what should we say, sort of watchy comment from Mrs. Hensman, which was something to the effect of, "It's a good job you put your idea in, Douglas." That was the one they chose.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see, we've still got
I
more.
suppose
Oh, no.
you missed out all the adventures when it was being painted. And because it was being done in a hurry, Neil and I were doing work on 3 vehicles spread around the system. We'd separated it. We worked over a weekend doing God knows what hours, cleaning it up because there was a deadline. And in moving it, sadly, one of the connectors got pulled off. So we looked at the other end, worked out the 7 positions on the caravan connector, and connected the one that we pulled off back up again in what we assumed was the same formation. Anyway, when it all got put, we told the chief engineer, and then we got soundly bollocked. He came in, he said, "Look at this diagram. Tell me where you've gone wrong." I read the number, number 1 red, number 2, whatever the numbers were, all the way around. And we had wired it up correctly according to the diagram. It had not been wired up according to the diagram. And ever thereafter, until nearly the time it went, it had a spiral in its wiring system, if that makes sense, because something at one end worked, something at the other end worked, as long as all the carriages were in the right order. As soon as you took it out, it was like DNA, for want of it. It blew every relay in West Cumbria.
Oh, gosh.
Until they worked out where they had gone wrong. This came to be a problem with having, I think, 2 colour blind
Yes.
engineers put things together with a meter.
And then we're going transatlantic for the next comment. We had a scooter on the Riverside and Great Northern Railway that was powered by a Maytag washing machine motor. When it would throw its drive chains, it came to a sudden stop. I bet it did.
Yes. I'm sure you could embellish that, Mike.
And Matthews correctly pointed the Queen rode behind Sheila. And Mike Henderson, so Arthur Hayward was built by Ken Williamson, and which was the Silliff one, and is at Eastleigh, and was later built by Brett Rogers.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and
That was, yeah.
And it went to Grosvenor Park for a bit, didn't it? When Robin Buttrell had his first
I
incarnation.
never saw it now, but yeah, I could imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, is this the Northern Rock one, like the one that became Sir Arthur?
Yes, it looks like Northern Rock, but with round windows.
Yeah, there is some footage on YouTube. It's one of the very old videos that's been put onto YouTube on Grosvenor Park, and it's painted red in those shots.
Yeah, don't tell Sam that, Matthew.
However, from a museum point of view, and going back to Sheila, his royal visit, if anybody knows the location of the royal plaque that it carried, it will be very interesting to learn, because it disappeared during a period on the locomotive when it was under restoration.
Oh,
Somewhere out there,
There's a
there's
special
about
plaque.
a 10-inch bronze coloured plaque.
is that the one that says Her Majesty the Queen rode on this at Liverpool Garden
With a
Festival?
crown.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Got a picture of it.
I've got a picture of it.
Yeah, that's the only thing that survived.
If you're still watching Roger's video, he's just shown you Black Prince's tender, which has just been lettered. They were
It looks absolutely stunning.
Very
couple
good.
up today. Had a trial steam around New Romney to make sure the speedo worked, and it's having its official launch on Saturday, along with the opening of our Heritage Information Centre Museum.
Oh. Very good.
We're getting a hell of a tour around the engine shed here.
Our scooter on the RNGN was quite fast.
Yeah.
And it paid to hang on as you were going down the track. Avoid being catapulted off if the chain came loose.
Oh, brilliant. Yes, I think we might have to come back to Mike at some stage in the future and get a few more stories from his part of the world. So we'll line you up for that, Mike.
Yes, well, I drove for 15 years on the RNGN. And then I moved up to the Burlington Northern and drove another 37.5.
That sounds to me as though you're doing one of our next sessions. I'll bet you've got some good stories.
And now I have a 7.5-inch railroad in the backyard.
Yes, yes, I've seen pictures, including the wonderful garage doors.
We've just missed Samson there on the the Romney scooter, which is rather bigger than our scooters.
Engine is small though.
And Simon has suggested he thinks that flower with the blue background is at the Bure Valley.
Oh, lovely. Thank you.
Which might explain the funny red coat the man was wearing, because that was their uniform in the early days, I think. We don't get many Bure Valley people joining in these talks.
I don't think the wire stretches, David.
And Mark's mentioned, hasn't Dundee got new valve gear? And the Dundee now has gone back to Stevenson's valve gear after, was it Southern valve gear?
It got that's right.
Yeah.
It got modified by Professor Paul Vestel, or under his jurisdiction. Strangely enough, they took the inside valve off at the time that they took the side tanks off. So access to the valve was not impeded, should we say?
Yeah.
And Robert Fox has asked Roger to show us Black Prince, which he did do. And we're currently seeing a demonstration of tube cleaning at the Romney Harvard Church Railway. He's not doing it to Bonnie Tyler this time, though.
He's either got no brush on there, a very small brush, or he's making it look very, very easy. There's 24 tubes to do.
He must be really dirty because his teeth aren't half white, aren't they? When
Careful, Ryan. Careful.
Lovely teeth, Alan.
And Matthew's answered the valve gear question for us. And Sol has mentioned that something is yellow. Well, I suspect he's referring to Sir Arthur Haywood, which has now gone into Northern Rock green. And as Trevor told us it was green last time, we will stay that it's green.
Yes.
Because he knows about Northern Rock. Yes. And I think...
Just so we don't upset Sam.
No. Especially when he's on holiday. It might tip him over the edge.
How many to go, Alan?
He's slowed down a bit now.
Well,
Yes, this is better than Railcam, isn't it?
11 if he's got that far around, I would say.
Yes.
The most
See if
job
we
of all,
can make it work.
right at the end of the day.
How long's it been since you brushed some tubes, Andy?
Oh, well, I Spitfire on Sunday, but that's only a 3.5 inch. It's still got 17 inch. Oh, look, he has got a on there. All right, Alan. Quite a big one.
I'll just,
How often do you normally have to do the tubes at Romney?
Well, really, you should do them every day.
Right?
I think some people complain their engines are not steaming very well, and then say, well, when did you last tube it? Last week.
All right. Well, I did River-esque about 2 months ago.
Really?
Andy, didn't Derek Smith reckon that Chief never did tubing at all?
I think I've heard that. Yeah, I think it might be a slight exaggeration. Yeah.
I
Well,
don't know about you, but this is more
It's more
entertaining
entertaining than the talk,
the
isn't it?
archive
Yes,
evening.
yeah.
So we have a new format, folks.
Yes, we're live from Gala Lodge in the engine shed.
like you stopped for a puff.
So I think we will leave Alan and Roger to their engine cleaning, as fascinating as it is. I'm sure they'll have a greatest hits collection coming out at some point, available on Facebook. But thank you again all for watching. Thank you for Dave for pulling that talk together, and I hope that it's cast a light on that our engine building was a bit more than just Northern Rocks, and we dabbled into other things as well. We will be back here first week of October. We're not sure quite what the talk will be at that point. We may all need visas to head to Japan. We'll see if we can persuade him. And but once again, thank you all for watching, and we will see you all again soon. Thanks a lot, everyone. Good
Cheers,
night.
Dave. Thanks, Stuart.
Everybody.
Guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.